Hello, so welcome to another reading vlog. This week my main goal is going to be reading Words of Radiance, although actually I don't think I'm going to read the whole thing because when I reread The Way of Kings, so this will also be a reread, when I reread The Way of Kings it took me like 3 weeks, and I think if I try to fit this whole chunky book into a single reading vlog I'll just feel like I'm taking way too long. So what I'm going to do is like focus on reading the first half. So this book is 1,080 pages, which means I need to read 540 pages to consider this done. So I'm sure most of you will know what Words of Radiance is about. I'm maybe not going to get into it too much until I actually get into rereading this, but in the first book we basically followed a few different characters as they were introduced to the magic of this world, as well as we learned a lot about the war that's going on between these people and also this like other race that's maybe not entirely human, maybe a little bit human, maybe there's a few mysteries around them. So I found my reread of Way of Kings like so great because there were so many things that I know eventually happen in the series, but they were alluded to and there were like so many clues in that first book. So I'm hoping there'll be lots of clues in this one as well. I also know that this has the backstory of Shalon in it, and Shalon is one of my favorite characters. I actually think this book is a beautiful addition, and it has these lovely like end pages in it. So that's Shalon drawing. Is it just Shalon on the back in this one? I think these editions get better and better. No, the back is the map. But also throughout these books there is a bunch of different pictures. Let's try to skip to one and hope it hasn't got spoilers. Like a lot of them are like from Shalon's sketchbook where she takes a lot of notes about the world. So I know what that's about. So I will be keeping this book probably open to about where I am so that I can keep track of where I'm up to, but also so that whenever I get to those pictures I can like look at them in full size, just because so often when I read on my ebook, so I'm mostly going to be reading on my ebook just because this is too heavy to carry around, and also this edition is too special and I don't want to ruin it. So I have Words of Radiance on my Kindle. I'll be reading it this way, but whenever I get to a picture, I'll look at it in full size on there. As well though, of course, I have to have an audiobook on the go. I actually have a few which are soon going to return themselves to the library, so I need to try and prioritize them. Okay, so I think we're going to start with The Olympian Affair by Jim Butcher. This is the sequel to The Aeronaut's Windlass, just kind of about, it's this world where humans now live on these spires and they use airships to go between them, and there's a couple of different spires kind of starting to get involved in this war. So we're following characters who fly these airships, as well as a bunch of guard students, as well as some etherealists who are like the magicians of this world, and they're my favorite parts because they're so eccentric. And we also have talking cats, and they have their whole cat-like society, which I really love. So I'm looking forward to some parts. To be honest, I tried reading the physical book earlier in the year and I ended up DNFing it. But I had reread the first book via audiobook and I thought the audiobook was okay, and I just think there's some parts of this series that I would like to just skip past, so we're going to listen to the audiobook so that those can just flow past me, and then I can really engage when we're talking about etherealists or the cats. So that's what we're going to start with this week, and I guess I will let you know when we have made some progress. Hello. So in the last day, was it just one day? I think so. It felt longer, but anyway, in the last day, I think I'm up to page 128. 128 pages in a day is pretty good, especially when the pages are this big, or like that's a good amount for me anyway. And as well, my ebook is saying that I have about 26 hours to go. So if tonight I read another hour's worth, then I'll have 25 hours. And I think if I want to finish this book around the time that I was originally planning to, even though I've now got less days, if I could read 2.5 hours every day, maybe I could get it done. Is that realistic? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe. Just depends what happens with life, I guess. Anyway, to set things up, basically so far, for the characters that are on the war front, so that's pretty much Kaladin, Dalinar, and Adolin, and Navani. I actually really like Navani, so I shouldn't forget her. Navani is the mother of the king and like is an inventor of these fabrials. So it's really interesting because in this world, as well as all this magic, there are these fabrials which are kind of using ancient technology, or is it magic? It's not really clear, but the main one they kind of use as a span read where two pens across a distance will be connected, and if you write with one it will write in the other location, and that's what they often use to communicate across long distances. And Navani's like an inventor of these fabrials. Anyway, that's a distraction. Basically, for all these characters on the war front, there's been a big threat up here that they now have to deal with, so like some disasters happening for them. But I am always kind of less interested in the plot on the war front, at least until we start getting some more of the Pashendi, who are the other creatures that they're battling against. We haven't gotten into that yet. And then on the other side we've got Shalon and Jasna. So Shalon is this young noblewoman who went to Jasna to try and get her to help out with her problems, her family problems. And they're both doing a lot of research into the magic of the world and the history of the world. So it's through them at the moment that we're really learning more about the magic, particularly the Spren. So in the Stormlight Archives there are Spren that kind of appear, like little spirit creatures that appear. Like if it's really windy there'll be Wind Spren. If you get really angry there'll be Anger Spren. If you're creating something there'll be Creation Spren that start popping up. Like just all these little spirits that show up, Flame Spren in the fire. And through Shalon and Jasna's research we're learning more about what's going on with those creatures. But something has really just gone wrong for them as well, which I think is going to lead to Shalon kind of going off by herself again from memory. And I hope though we will keep learning about the magic. I've kind of forgotten. As well, there has been like some allusions to Shalon's past, not really any actual jumping back in time flashbacks yet. What I will say is I've remembered something that annoys me in Words of Radiance and also Oathbringer, the next book, is the reliance of that trope where a character doesn't remember something about their past and then the memories kind of come back in a time that's convenient for the plot of the current book. Brandon Sanderson also uses this in the Frugal Wizard's Handbook to Surviving Medieval England. I think I got that title right. He uses it in that as well, and I hated it in that. I'm somewhat willing to let it pass in the Stormlight Archives, but I think it annoyed me more in Oathbringer than it did in Words of Radiance because like I hated it when he used it twice. But I think as well for Shalon's story, like I like her story and I find it interesting enough that I'm willing to overlook it. So about 120-ish pages in, and I am so far really enjoying this reread. Hopefully that enjoyment will continue. I haven't yet managed to pick up any of the audiobooks that I was hoping to read during this vlog, but hopefully we'll find some time for that along the way, and I'll check in when we've read some more. Hello, so this morning I did go for a run and I managed to get 40% of the way through the Olympian Affair, which was good. However, also I fell down a hill and scratched up my hand and scratched up my knee, so that's not the best. And mostly today I've been kind of resting, or this afternoon at least, and I've been getting through quite a lot of Words of Radiance. I know I said this might take me so long that I needed to do it as part of 2 vlogs, but I actually think now I can get through it in the next week. I mean, I think my Kindle's still saying it's like 20 hours, which seems like a lot, but also we don't really have anything planned, so why not try? I just think I'm finding it really easy to kind of blast through the story. I don't know what it is, but it's just really consumable. Maybe it's just I haven't been reading things that have been as well written and as engaging lately, but I'm really enjoying it. And I think as well, like this is a reread for me, but I don't remember a lot of things. Like I know high level what's going to happen, but I don't remember exactly how it's going to happen or like when it's going to happen. So I'm constantly afraid for these things that I know are coming at some point, but I'm maybe not picking up on as many things or like as many clues as I was in Way of Kings, where I remembered more of the story. So that definitely justifies my reread here, because also there's a lot of things where like I just don't remember them being in the story the first time I read it. And then I know that there's things both in Oathbringer and Edge Dancer, which I felt like at the time came quite out of the blue and hadn't really been set up. But now I can see they were set up. I'd just forgotten it. Another thing that I'm experiencing differently on this reread is kind of Kaladin and Eladin. Their names are very similar. I never pick up on that when I'm reading it. But anyway, Kaladin and Elodin have kind of a bit of a conflict. They don't get along. And I know the first time I read that, I was totally on Kaladin's side and not a fan of Elodin. But this time, I actually feel like I'm more on Elodin's side. But also, I'm just really frustrated about the two having a disagreement at all because it's so unnecessary. So I kind of just want them to get past it, even though I know that's not probably happening in this book as far as I remember. As well, we haven't really been getting enough of Shalon's backstory, but I think like I'm only, what's the percentage? 30% of the way through, so there's still plenty. We got a little bit, and that definitely just made me think, oh, I've forgotten more stuff. I really want to get into it. What we have got in this book that I had also forgotten is more of the Pashendi's perspective, and now I remember that that's a part I really love, so I'm enjoying that too. Basically, enjoying the whole thing, and I definitely recommend rereading this. At this point, let me continue the book and then we'll see, but I don't imagine it will change. The other thing, so I was listening to the audiobook of The Olympian Affair, and I definitely wouldn't be raving about this one as much. I have actually even pumped up the audiobook to 2.5 speed just because like I just want to get through it. And you might say, Penny, you should just DNF it, but like there are bits that I really like. I don't really remember what I told you about this at the beginning of the vlog, but so much of the story is focused on these different airships and all the politics around this like war that's kind of starting up, but also nothing's really happening. And I think I'm really frustrated about one of the main characters, Grim, who's kind of set up as he's this amazing airship captain and everyone respects him so much and he's so smart and strategic and such a great leader, but I just honestly don't buy it. I couldn't really tell you why, but I just don't buy it. And then any of his parts, I'm just not really enjoying it. And then we're not really getting enough of the cats. We are getting some, and I do enjoy the bits with the cats and their whole society and the way that they interact with people. I like that, but again, I want more of that and more of the etherealists, and unfortunately, we're just getting little tastes of that, so I'm kind of just blasting through the audiobook for the little tastes of the bits that I like. And also hoping that the plot will kind of come together because I just don't feel like there's enough of a plot. And probably people who like this book will say that the plot is there in the airship war stuff and the politics, and that's the stuff I don't care about. But I just think like that stuff that's being set up, there isn't enough to it. And I wish there was like kind of a more clear plot that could be attached to. I don't know, but anyway, I'm not really loving it, which isn't really a surprise since I did already DNF the physical book and decided to move it to audiobook. But anyway, I will keep continuing it. Now that I'm at 2.5 speed, it shouldn't take that long. Maybe another run or two. Although maybe on my next run I could not fall over. That would be great. Okay, so I went for another run this morning and I managed not to fall over again, which is good because my hand is still quite sore. But I also managed to get about 60% of the way through The Olympian Affair. I think in my last update I said I thought I could get through it in the next run. That was delusional. Although I went for a shorter run this morning than normal, so I probably got through less of it because of that as well. But anyway, I think it's probably unfortunate for The Olympian Affair that I'm reading it at the same time as Words of Radiance because it just doesn't compare. There has been some cool parts with the cats, but very little with the etherealists, and then just there's so much happening which I think is really dependent on feeling emotionally connected to the characters, which I do not. So I'm a little bit bored, but I think I'll still keep going. Just for the cats, basically. So then, yeah, to contrast with that, Words of Radiance, I'm loving it. I think I'm also about 60% of the way through, 62% of the way through, so I just got to the end of part 3. I have to say, people always say that Words of Radiance is the best book in the series, and I've always been like, was it? Maybe. On my reread, I'm like, oh yeah, I think it is. There's just so much happening that is so easy to get emotionally engaged in, and like, even at the end of part 3, there's kind of this big action scene, and I often get bored in action scenes, and that's a big problem with The Olympian Affair. So I often get bored in action scenes, but because the action that's happening is so important in like so many different layers, like there's connections into the magic and the politics, the different characters, like personal plot lines, as well as the interactions with other people. It's really great. I was reading this fight scene that was happening, and then something happened and I was like, oh, groaning. And then the character, it said they groaned and I was like, yes, you get it. It's really good. Even though this is a reread for me, there has been a couple of bits where a bit of information's been revealed, and I don't know if I picked up on it last time, but I've been like, oh, the ramifications of that. And honestly, I'm still not even picking up on everything. Like, for example, at the beginning of every chapter, there's like a little introduction, and throughout the series, like what that introduction is changes. Like most parts, I think, have a different focus. So in part 3, we're getting little excerpts of this book called Words of Radiance, which in this world is basically an explanation of the way the magic works or the way the magic was used by certain people in the past. And honestly, all of those I just feel like are going completely over my head. But I do feel like at some point in the future, when I've read more of this book, it will mean more to me. And so I definitely feel like once I've read more books in this series, we'll be doing another reread where we will probably be picking up on even more. And I think that's part of what makes this series so great, is that there's so much to it. And as well, I'm about to read the next interludes, and I can see the 3 characters' perspectives that we're going to get is Lift, Seth, and Ishonai, and all of those I am super excited for. And you know, often when you're reading multi-perspective books, you get a certain character's perspective and you're like, well, this guy again. And I will admit, in Way of Kings, that was Adeline and Dalinar for me. But in this one, like, every different perspective we're getting is something I'm loving. It's just so good, and like I now have almost no doubt that I will finish this by the end of the week because I just don't want to do anything else but read it. Hello. So I did go for a run this morning, even though I didn't really want to because it's a horrible rainy day, and I'm really close to the end of the Olympian Affair. I've got like 3 more hours left, which at 2.5 times speed is like an hour pretty much. So I guess at some point I'll just finish that off. But I do kind of think at this point that this series might be one I have to DNF. I just think, even though whenever we get the cats, I really like it. Especially in this one, there's like a kitten and an older cat that are kind of always at odds with each other, and I really enjoy that. And I really enjoy the Etherealists, but I just got through this quite long action-y type bit where we had a couple of duels and then a big airship battle, and I just was so bored. I just can't really connect to most of the characters. I think maybe if you like that Victorian steampunk feel, you would like this. Like, I don't think it's necessarily badly written, and it can sometimes be quite funny, but I'm just bored. I don't know. It's a bit sad, but I think it's just not the story for me, even though there's some elements that I really like. Contrastly though, we have Words of Radiance here, and I'm now up to part 5, the last part of the book, and I am super excited to continue it. I think my Kindle's telling me it should take me less than 5 hours. So that's exciting. And I have to say, so I've been doing kind of a big Cosmere reread, and I feel like this book is maybe not the first one where I felt like really emotionally engaged, but like in a little while, in the books that I've read recently, it's the first one in a while that I've been feeling emotionally engaged. Like, I'm just really enjoying my reading experience and like finding all the little pieces of what's going on, and even the stuff that I know it's going to happen already because this is a reread. I'm like anticipating that next thing. I will say, again, on the reread, I'm feeling quite differently about Kaladin. He is making some terrible decisions, and I know on my first read I thought he was making terrible decisions, but now I'm much more annoyed at him than I was the first time. And I think as well I'm liking Shalon a lot more. I still do really like her backstory, like the flashbacks, which I remembered liking, but I'd forgotten so much about it, so it is very satisfying on a reread to see how everything's fitting together. I think as well, the first time I read this series, I don't think I really picked up enough how much the personalities of the characters or the traits of the characters were linking in to the kinds of magic that they can do. So it's quite nice to appreciate that on a reread as well. So honestly, it's very rereadable. It is actually making me want to just blast straight into Oathbringer. But after I finish this, I'm going to read a couple of Mistborn Era 2 books, I think, before I come back to that, because I'm reading in publication order. But also, I keep reminding myself that I didn't like Oathbringer as much as I like Words of Radiance, so I don't want to be too eager. But maybe I'll appreciate Oathbringer more on a reread. I definitely think I am appreciating Words of Radiance more on a reread, even though I did like it the first time too. There's just so much complexity to the world. I feel like you could reread these books quite a lot of times and still be getting something out of it. Anyway, I feel like I've already raved about this a lot, so I will finish this off and also finish off the Olympian Affair, and then I guess we will see what my final thoughts are. But I don't think they'll change too much. Which is a good thing for Words of Radiance, not so good for the Olympian Affair. I have finished Words of Radiance, and I think, unsurprisingly, I really liked it. I will admit, though, I have one complaint about the end. Like, mostly it was super exciting. There were some really heroic moments. Like, even though I knew it was coming, I was like, oh, this person's going to come in and it's going to be like, they save the day and it's amazing. But then also, like, after the kind of the big, heroic, epic battle things, there were some things kind of set up for Oathbringer that were maybe unexpected. But I think actually the thing that annoyed me with the whole last battle thing is it's like this big battle, but there's kind of like the side thing where I'll try to keep it spoiler light. Basically, they're trying to find this magical thing the whole way through the book. And then right at the end, while they're doing this big last battle, they're like, now we have to find the magical thing and we have to use it. We have to work out how to use it, even though there's no reason to necessarily even believe that we'll be able to find it or that we'll be able to figure out how to use it. But like somehow we're making our plans reliant on doing it within a very tight time frame. It's a terrible plan, and given that, you know, a lot of the people with this plan are supposed to be really smart, military, strategic masterminds, like, really? That's your plan? You didn't come up with a backup plan? So that bit did annoy me a bit, but we'll let it slide. I'm really glad that I reread this, not just because I had such a great time rereading it, but also there is just so many things I picked up on a reread that I think now will put me in a better position for understanding Oathbringer on my reread of that. Like, maybe there's things in Oathbringer that were just going over my head, but I still think I'm not going to enjoy Delanor's backstory, so I still think this is going to be my favourite one in the series. However, once I finish my reread of Oathbringer, then I can read A Rhythm of War, and that's a big unknown for me because I haven't read it yet, even though I have had it over on my shelf there ever since it's been released. And I think now, given that I read this one quickly, I should be okay with getting through everything by the time I can get Wind and Truth in my hands. Like, possibly not by the time it's released, but it'll take me time to get it here in New Zealand, so I probably won't be too far behind, which is exciting. And definitely if anyone is thinking about doing a reread of the series before the 5th book comes out, I'd recommend it. Because probably, if you're anything like me, you've forgotten a lot of things. The other thing was the Olympian Affair. I finished reading that, and honestly the whole last bit was really incredibly boring. Now again, maybe it didn't help that I was reading the end of Words of Radiance and this was so exciting, so the end of the Olympian Affair being so boring just seemed even more boring by contrast. And like, I want to say it's just because it was this big action heavy section at the end, but you know, this was an action heavy section at the end, but I still enjoyed it. And actually my main complaints with this one at the end are the non-action bits. Anyway, I think I'm going to have to just give up on the... What is that series even called? I've forgotten. But even though there are some elements that I really love about the Aeronauts, Windless, Olympian Affair series, I just don't think that's the series that Jim Butcher is writing. It's pretty much the same way I felt about the Harry Dresden books. Like, there's some elements I really love, but the overall thing is just not for me. I can definitely see that some people will like it though, like if you like that Victorian steampunk thing and you want some airship battles and maybe some duels and some... Oh, I don't know. I didn't like it, so I don't know. But if it sounds interesting, maybe try it out, but just don't think that you're going to get too much of the cats or the etherealists. Also yesterday though, while I was on my run where I finished the Olympian Affair, I did also start reading Dark One Forgotten, which is a Brandon Sanderson... I don't really know, like, it's a book, but it's only in audiobook form, and now having read it, I can't see it working in any form except for audiobook form, because it's kind of written as like a true crime podcast, but investigating the situation where this very famous violinist just disappeared and then everybody completely forgot her, but now this young girl is finding all these things that prove that she really did exist and questioning, well, why did everybody forget her? It's interesting because the cover made me have it in mind that it was science fiction, even though I know that it links into the fantasy graphic novel series Dark One that Brandon Sanderson had made previously, and that I think he's planning to like change into a book because I don't think the graphic novel worked that well. But anyway, I am really enjoying this audiobook. I'm about halfway through now. It sometimes can be like a little bit young. The characters are university students and some of the jokes are a little bit silly, but like I don't mind it, and I've just been finding the story really engaging, and it's a fairly short audiobook, so that's how I got halfway through already. I'll definitely be finishing it, but actually probably not until my next vlog because this one is too long already. And I did actually start my next physical book for next week's vlog as well. But anyway, let me know if you've got any thoughts about Words of Radiance that you'd like to chat about, or if you've been reading anything else exciting lately. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.